This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning. You're listening to the Mac and Jack Sports Show on Northeast Streaming Sports.
The Mac and Jack Sports Debate Show. I'm your host, Mac, with your co-host, Jack Hirsch, as we dive into some topics from way back in the NFL, and we bring you all the way up to the present day. Should be an interesting debate today. Good morning, Jack. Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today, Jack?
Hey, good morning, Mac.
So, Jack, let's get right into it. Probably the most important game in the history of the NFL was the 1969 Super Bowl between the mighty Baltimore Colts and the New York Jets. And that brought the AFL and the NFL together under one umbrella. Pete Rozelle was the commissioner at the time. And this all depended, I think, in my opinion anyway, as to whether the Jets won or not. Well, they won. It all came under one umbrella. There was a realignment. A lot of things happened because of this game. But what happens, Jack, if the Jets lose that game? What would have happened after that, do you think?
Yeah, it was the most important game of the Super Bowl era. Okay, I mean, some people feel the Giant Colt game ushered in big-time football in the late 1950s, the overtime game, but definitely the most important game of the Super Bowl era. You and I, Mac, think before the Super Bowl, but we know a lot of fans, football doesn't seem to have started for them till the Super Bowl because they talk about championships, and they never talk about franchises that won NFL championships before the Super Bowl. But I sometimes think about that, okay? That was Super Bowl III. The first two Super Bowls were won by the Green Bay Packers. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs 35-10. Then the following year, they beat a very good Oakland Raider team that had a 13-1 record in the AFL. They beat them 33-14. And it wasn't as close as the score indicated because the Raiders got a late touchdown to make it a 19-point game instead of a 26-point game at the end. So by the time the Colts played the Jets in Super Bowl III, the Colts were 18-point favorites. Imagine that, 18-point favorites. And the Colts had a great team. They were 13-1. They'd lost only one game during the regular season. That was for the Minnesota Vikings, who they then beat in the playoffs, okay? And going into the championship game, the Baltimore Colts had beaten the Cleveland Browns 34-0. And the New York Jets, in a tremendous game, a classic game, got by the Oakland Raiders 27-23. And it was a question of last man standing in a game like that, because Oakland was driving for the go-ahead touchdown at the end, Mac. And then Darryl LaMonica threw a backward lateral. Okay, I guess every lateral is backwards. Yeah. And it was recovered by the Jets. And Oakland didn't realize, the players, when the lateral was thrown, it was a live ball even though it hit the ground. So they're standing around and the Jets recovered. Even though Oakland got the ball back at the very end, there wasn't enough time left. It's okay, I'm talking about the history of this, man.
Sure.
You're amused by it. So that set the stage for Super Bowl III. And it was an interesting game going in because of Joe Namath, because of the charisma. The Jets were a New York team, but the Colts were expected to dominate. I mean, hardly anyone was expecting the Jets to win. People might say later, yeah, I thought they'd win. It was a question more, could the Jets cover the 18 points?
Right.
And I remember thinking as a kid, yeah, they could lose by 13 points maybe, but never did I think the Jets would actually win the game. And all the people who said afterwards, oh, yeah, I thought the Jets would win, they're lying, Mac. They're flat out liars, okay? They said they thought the Jets were going to win the game, because some were calling the Colt team at that time the greatest in NFL history, even better than the Packer teams. But the Colts didn't have the great Johnny Unitas starting for them. He
Right,
was
right.
available as a backup because he had shoulder problems. Earl Morrall had quarterbacked the team that year, and Earl Morrall had been magnificent all year long. And the Colts had, I mean, great players. Bubba Smith, defensive tackle. Mike Curtis, middle linebacker. I mean, they had John Mackey as their tight end, Tom Matty as their halfback, Willie Richardson, another receiver there. I mean, they were just loaded with great players. And the Jets were a very good team, but it was a question of a pretty good team going against arguably the greatest team in NFL history. But as it turned out, this may have been a case of the better team not winning. Being a big Jet fan, if you're going to ask me to be honest about it, who really had the better team was the Baltimore Colts. Had they played the Jets a 14-game schedule, okay, let's say they had to play every week all season, the Colts win 10 of the 14 games.
I believe
They
that's
do.
right. Yeah.
The Colts, but that day the Colts threw, 4 interceptions. I mean, right before the first half ended, they hand off to Tom Matty, who turns around and throws it back to Earl Morrall. And Jimmy Orr, their great wide receiver's wide open. He's waving his hands. But Earl Morrall throws it to someone else, and Jim Hudson, the Jets safety, picks it off. It should have been an easy 7 points for that Colt team. And don't tell me Pags is about to come in the middle. I mean,
yes, he is.
He always likes to ruin my, talk.
He heard you talking a lot. He probably decided to
keep
jump
the
in.
screen talk. Keep him in the
Good morning,
back.
Pags. Good morning.
Time to come in.
Glad to have you.
But I'm going to get to the point. Joe Namath, I'm going to get a cut to the chase now. Joe Namath guaranteed a Jet victory. Let's say the Colts won that game the way they should have won the game, you would think, even though the Jets played very well. And the Jets were the better team that day. They were the better team that day. And I'll just give you one little example why they were the better team that day, Mac. When the Jets were up 16-0 in the fourth quarter, it was important for the Colts to score quick and conserve time on the clock. They won their 1 yard line. The Jets stuffed them on 2 straight handoffs. People forget that. On the third one, they scored from 1 yard out. But if your defensive line could hold the other team at 1st and 1 and make them finally score on 3rd and 1 when they had to save time off the clock, that said a lot for the Jet defense and on the day. Okay, so let's make believe the Colts had won that game. The league still would have merged, I believe. But there was some talk about doing away with the Super Bowl. But keep this in mind. Historically, the next year, the Chiefs played the Minnesota Vikings and beat them 23-7. So the AFL would have gotten a breakthrough. Now, would the Chiefs have had as much confidence in beating the Vikings without the Jets winning? Probably a little less, because they would have been the inferior AFL. That would have hung on their head. But they'd probably win that game, the Chiefs. So history would have played out differently. Would Joe Namath would even be in the Hall of Fame? He would be remembered as the guy who guaranteed a Jet victory, and they didn't do it. And people would have kind of brushed it off. So Joe Namath may have ultimately gotten in the Hall of Fame a lot of years later, or maybe he wouldn't even be in the Hall of Fame, but he wouldn't be the icon that he is. That we know. He would just be another flamboyant, charismatic guy, but not quite the icon.
So Jack still believes that the NFL and AFL would emerge. So Pags, what we're saying that, of course, the Jets won the '69 Super Bowl. What happens if they didn't? What happens if the Colts win that? Do you agree that they merge?
I'm sure that they merge, but Joe made it. Let's face it. Joe made it into the Hall of Fame because of that. The pantyhose commercial. That's it. That's all he was. He was Broadway Joe. Come on, wasn't that good of a quarterback?
No, we don't know if the Jets lost that Super Bowl game. Joe Namath wouldn't have any Super Bowl wins to his credit. And if you take away the Super Bowl, he didn't really have a great career, not as far as longevity. He had some great big moments, great moments. I think he would eventually get into the Hall of Fame. I think so because he still would have been a big personality, but I can't say with absolute confidence that would have been the case that he would have gotten in. I
No,
can't
he
say.
let's face it. He made it into the Hall of Fame specifically because he said that they were going to win that Super Bowl, and they did. And that's that. I mean, it's like
Well,
he was really entered into the Hall of Fame specifically on that one win, and the cause of that win created, the merger and such like that. It was, I mean,
well, let me ask
like
you this
Hank Stram.
question,
Hank
though.
Stram also was. I mean, he only had one Super Bowl win, and he was a good coach, but he's also in the Hall of Fame because of that Super Bowl win.
Wait. Not just because of the Super Bowl. When Hank Stram's Kansas City Chiefs played in the first Super Bowl, too, against the Packers, so he took them there, another time to the Super Bowl. And they had a number of really good Chief teams, outstanding Chief teams.
So let's get back to the point. If you want to call in and express your opinion, or put your comment in, you can call in 860-371-1748. Guys, I'm not so sure that they merge. I mean, if you think about this, Pete Rozelle, this was his crowning moment. He wanted to bring in these other teams, new revenue maybe, and there was talk by a certain player on the Colts and other people, and this sounds maybe like a conspiracy, that the game might have been fixed. That maybe that the Colts were the best team, but they fixed it so the Jets could win. Now, how would they do that? Earl Morrall, who was a great, probably maybe the best second string quarterback in the history of the NFL, throws 4 interceptions. If he doesn't throw those 4 interceptions, if he throws one, Colts probably win that game. Johnny Unitas is out. He's hurt. They bring him in the second, third, fourth quarter. I forget. He leads them on a drive to kick a field goal. I think it was.
No, a touchdown, but Johnny Unitas had no arm at that point.
But if they start Unitas, he maybe doesn't throw 4 interceptions. So there are some conspiracy theories out there that this was a setup. Bubba Smith is the one that said this, Jack.
Well, first off, Unitas had nothing in the tank. After the Colts cut it to 16-7, they recovered an onside kick, okay? And Unitas's last drive stalled. When they had a chance to maybe get a touchdown, another onside kick, a field goal. And keep this in mind, one of the interceptions bounced off the Colt receiver. I think it was Willie Richardson. His shoulder pad and went high, or Jimmy Orr went high up in the air, and Randy Beverly intercepted it. There's no way it was scripted, no way it was fixed. It's ridiculous to even go there with that. If it was fixed in any way, shape, or form, it would get out. With all these investigations, you think it could be kept secret under wraps? It's insane to think the game was fixed. Listen, I think also, guys, the Eagle Super Bowl victory over the Patriots was fixed because when they stripped Tom Brady, that was fixed. No one ever strips Tom Brady. I'm only being sarcastic now, of course. But imagine someone saying that was fixed because the league wanted the Patriots to lose to the Eagles. That's ridiculous. And it's the same way saying that about the Colts, the Jets. Any Super Bowl.
Why would Bubba Smith think that, Jack? I mean,
why did Bubba Smith play better that game?
You're talking a Hall of Fame, great defensive end, could play today in the NFL. He was that big and that strong. He claims it's fixed. Maybe he knows something that we don't know, and maybe the NFL is just keeping it.
I feel like Bubba Smith said that because he just he wasn't brought back for Police Academy 4, and he tried to make himself relevant.
Let me just say,
let's be for real.
Once. Bubba Smith sacked Namath once in the game, but otherwise, Dave Herman, the Jet guard, he handled Bubba Smith. Bubba Smith didn't play that well in the game. Why don't we focus on that? Was Bubba Smith tanking at that game or what? He was kept in check for the most part. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of interesting bylines here, including including United's not playing. Namath's making that guarantee.
Unitas had no arm. He was ineffective when he was in there. And even when they finally got the last touchdown, what I referred to a while ago, they wasted time on the clock. And eventually he led them to a score. He came in the third quarter and they got him to 7 points. He didn't play well, Unitas, because his arm was gone. He was injured. He had nothing on his throws. They tailed off. That's what the problem was. He resembled a version of Brock Purdy in the playoff game against the Eagles when Purdy was injured. But Purdy couldn't throw the ball at all beyond 3 yards. Unitas could do a little better than that. But the point I'm trying to make, Unitas had nothing there. If Unitas was healthy, he would have played from the get-go.
So let's get to the point again. I believe that the NFL and AFL don't come together. I think the NFL maybe takes the best teams from the AFL, and the other teams that weren't that good, I think they let them go. I think that's how they do the NFL. That's how they combine it back then. So
I think they pretty much had agreed that they were going to merge before the game. I'm not certain what the timeline is, Mac. I be honest, I don't remember the exact timeline. By the time the Chiefs played the Vikings the following year, we knew that the AFL teams are going to be absorbed to the NFL. And we no longer had an AFL-NFL rivalry the year after the Jets beat the Colts. Instead was the AFC, NFC, because like 3 of the NFC teams were in the AFC. And then for Super Bowl V, we had the Baltimore Colts were back, and they played the Dallas Cowboys, which in reality were 2 NFL teams.
Right.
And that basically put an end to any AFL-NFL rivalry. It was fun. They should have the AFL go against the NFL for a longer period of time, because it was like the American League against the National League in baseball. No one cares about that now, but at one time we all did.
I mean, the AFL was the fun league at the time, right? You had some great players. You had Jim Brown was in the AFL at the time, and you had a lot of people throwing the ball all over the place.
Jim Brown.
Yeah.
Jim Brown was with the Cleveland Browns in the NFL.
He was in. The Browns were in the NFC at the time. You're right, but they had John Hadle. They had the Mad Bomber, Daryl LaMonica. They were throwing the ball all over the place. It was like the fun league compared to the NFL, which was.
They had better throwers in the AFL and the NFL.
At that time.
Yeah.
If you don't count Johnny Unitas. So anyway, let's get to the next question. Good morning to BLSG out there. Glad to have you aboard. So let's talk about a couple Super Bowl winners. And if they and their prime at their best playing each other in the Super Bowl. So I have the 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers, some feel the greatest Super Bowl team of all time, against the 1984 San Francisco 49ers. Suppose they played the Super Bowl, both in their prime. Pags, who you got?
I would have to take. That's a tough one. That really is a tough one. I'd probably go with the Steelers. The 49ers were doing this new offense, this West Coast offense, and was, but the 78. I mean, their defense wasn't spectacular. They won by outscoring teams. They had a good defense, but nothing spectacular. On the opposite side, you'd had not a spectacular offense, but an incredible defense. And that's where I kind of feel that difference would get made. It would be a close game. It would go down to the wire, but I think that it would be Pittsburgh that would win.
My feelings kind of mirror Pax's. Keep this in mind. Jerry Rice didn't join the Niners till the following year. So when we talk about how great the Niners were, maybe had they had Jerry Rice at his peak, you add him onto that team, that maybe tilts the scales in their favor. They had the great Joe Montana throw to Dwight Clark and Russ Francis, Roger Craig, a really solid running back. But look, I love that Steeler team with Lynn Swann, Franco Harris over there, Mean Joe Green, Mike Webster. I mean, you just look at the individual players on that Steeler team, and Terry Bradshaw was a darn good quarterback. No, he wasn't Joe Montana, who was. But Terry Bradshaw was an excellent quarterback, okay? And he wouldn't be a liability. He would get things done. And 4 Super Bowls in 6 years for the Steelers, that's a real dynasty. And even though the Niners were 15-1 that year, they lost only 1 game. They took care of business against Dan Marino and the Dolphins in the Super Bowl. The Steelers had to beat a great, great Dallas Cowboy team to win their Super Bowl. That Cowboy team was stacked. I mean, I could make an argument maybe that Cowboy team was as good as the 49er team, and the one that lost to the Steelers was maybe as good as that 49er team, at least very close. But Pax has it right. It's a tough call, but I give a little edge to the Steelers.
I'm going to go opposite both of you. I think the San Francisco 49ers, Joe Montana in a 2-minute drill, and I think it would come down to one of the last plays. Comeback Joe, I mean, he was always found a way to win the game. As you said, they beat the Miami Dolphins, and it wasn't a bad Miami Dolphins team, Jack, and they dominated the Dolphins. The West Coast offense, as Pags alluded to, Joe would have got rid of the ball faster than maybe Roger Staubach did, who liked to throw the ball deep. I think the 49ers might have slipped by the Pittsburgh Steelers, as great as they were, but it would have been a close game. The Steelers was a great team, but the 84 San Francisco 49ers, as you said, 15-1, and it would have been a great game. That's for sure.
Well, I'll say this. If Joe Montana had the ball with 2 minutes left, let's say on his own 35-yard line, you kind of like the Niners' chances. This is a great Joe Montana. But, I mean, the Steelers, that was called the steel curtain there. They had so many great defensive players. Who's to say they wouldn't have made a defensive stand? I mean, who's to say that? They didn't meet anyone, that 49er team of the Steeler caliber. And the Steelers could say they beat a legendary Dallas Cowboy team. Sometimes in the Super Bowl, unfortunately, on a conference championship game, you have 2 great teams, and both of them really are worthy of being championship teams and great championship teams, but only one can win it. I'm reading a book now, actually, that's an example, that Blood in the Garden. It talks about Pat Riley's Knicks. And the one year that the Knicks got beaten out by the Chicago Bulls, the Knicks had an outstanding team. They should have been an NBA championship team, but unfortunately, they run into Michael Jordan, and you could have only one NBA champion. Same thing with the Sacramento Kings, even though it was fixed by that, referee Tim Donaghy, awful guy. The Sacramento Kings are never recognized as NBA champions, but at the time they played the Lakers, they had a championship team, but they just never got that recognition.
So, just for the record, Jack and Paz go with the Steelers. I'll take the 49ers and Joe Montana.
Close. If they play a 14-game schedule, there's a good chance there'll be 7 games apiece, so one would win 8, the other 6. That's how close they were at the time.
All right. So, of course, the biggest college story this year is Deion Sanders, right? He goes to Buffalo, builds a team that beats TCU. A lot of people think TCU was as good as last year, but that doesn't matter. Right now, it's almost impossible to get a ticket to watch these guys play. So Deion Sanders, I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, is probably more popular than the best college football players out there. even Caleb Williams. Is this different than before, Jack? I mean, is this different where the coaches are outshining the players?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, if it's a big personality, that's what's going to happen. It happens in every sport. Look, when Billy Martin came to become manager of the Yankees, that was like a big story. You talk about today's Patriots in football. Who's the biggest name on their team? Bill Belichick, the coach, not a player. And Deion Sanders is a legendary player, one of the greatest of all time. Like him or not, he is position for position, one of the greatest of all time, great cover man and play return punts, etc. Deion Sanders has a big personality. He's newsworthy. Why am I going to be watching Colorado, Nebraska later? In large part because of Deion Sanders. Do you think I would even know Colorado was playing Nebraska? I mean, I would maybe know, but that would be about it. I wouldn't be watching the game at all. This is big stuff. It's Deion Sanders. Newt Rockney, was he much of a player? I don't know. You guys got to let me know if you know. But he was. We associate Notre Dame football, win one for the Gipper. Vince Lombardi with the Packers. The spotlight was on him more than any of his players. Bill Parcells with the Giants. The Giants had all these great players. Who did we use spotlight on, Mac? Bill Parcells more than anyone. Okay, so I don't think this is unusual.
I think LT was big as Parcells. Pax, what do you think?
So I'm going to answer this by asking you guys a question. Can you name me anybody on Alabama's team?
No, not off the top of my head.
No, we don't follow the rest of it. Yeah,
how about Georgia? How about Georgia?
I know where you're going with that. Yep. Good point.
If it wasn't for Deion Sanders having his two sons play on this Colorado team, I wouldn't know anybody on the Colorado team, even after they beat TCU. So I know that he has two sons that play on this team, and that's it. And he's the coach. At Jackson State, I knew that they had a coach, and his name was Deion Sanders, and he was able to pick the number one recruits from the nation and send him to Jackson State. And send him to Jackson State. And I agree. There is, I feel like Georgia and Alabama and LSU and Clemson better start figuring out what they're going to do to make sure that they don't start losing guys to Colorado. That's going to be the big question that comes up. You know, how do you recruit these kids and keep them away from Deion Sanders? Because that win just helped his recruiting base. Just that one win. He may not win another game this season. And that's not true. He's going to win a few more games. But he doesn't need to win another game this season. He's already got 4- and 5-star recruits that are looking at him to go play over in Colorado. And those recruits were earmarked by Georgia and Alabama.
Well, I think and in the past, and then you could go Bear Bryant, Woody Hayes. I mean, there's a lot of coaches that dominated college, especially college football. NFL, you do have these players, Patrick Mahomes, Reggie White, LT, that will grab more headlines than the coaches. But college football, I think, for the most part, has always been a coach, a coach spotlight league. They get most of the headlines. Difference is with this new NIL is Deion Sanders is doing something that other coaches have been hesitant to do. Alabama built a program. Georgia builds a program. They recruit. This is how they build their program, where Deion Sanders takes his NIL and just runs with it. And he that's how he gets his players. He's he's like the equivalent to the Rams when the Rams won the Super Bowl, right? They just went free agency and grabbed everybody they could, traded away all their draft picks, and that's how they went to the Super Bowl. I don't know if that's going to work in college. I have no idea. I don't know if Colorado is going to, in a year or two, is going to be up there playing for the national championship. But it did work in the NFL, Jack. So can it work in college?
Yeah, well, it's only one game, but so far, look, Colorado's relevant again. I mean, Colorado was dormant for years and years, and now their alumni is coming out. Their fundraising is up again. There's so much excitement on campus. Think of that university. What has their football team meant for years? Not much, but now there's excitement in the air. You know how much it's going today? The ticket for the Colorado game with Nebraska is something like 10 times the amount to buy it that it would normally be, which isn't a good thing. Don't get me wrong. To get to the game is going to be very, very expensive. But there's excitement. They're a spotlight team again. If there was another coach, let's say Nick Saban went to Colorado, or let's say Bill Belichick left the NFL. Let's make believe, and Colorado beats TCU under those coaches. We talk about what geniuses they are. And now, let's not diminish Deion Sanders. We know how his personality was in the NFL. We know his image and all, and it was deserved in large part. But at its core, Deion Sanders is a real football guy. He has all these years playing, and he's apparently more a student of the game than we thought, and more old school than we give him credit for. He came in and he cleaned house immediately. He says, I don't have any time for losers. You want to transfer, pack your bags and get out of here now, because I'm going to cut guys as is. I heard his own son came 5 minutes late to the meeting, and he kicked his son out. Just told him to leave, whatever. And I like what's going on there, but the wheels.
And I wouldn't be surprised. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was actually scripted. That just to do that, to send the message to the team, telling his son, hey, listen, I want you to show up 5 minutes late. Because I want to set the example for the rest of the team that even my child is not going to be excused from this type of, what I'm trying to grow here. Like I said, I wouldn't put it past Deion at all, because I feel like that makes a lot of sense to be able to really set the tone right away. And, like I said, he's got two kids there, so I would assume that the one that was late was the defensive guy, not the quarterback who threw for 550 yards. Truth of the matter is that TCU was ready to get beaten because they have no defense. They made it last year with no defense. So all you had to do is really have the offense, a good offense against them, and you would be able to go punch for punch, which is what they did. Had they not gotten down the field and kicked that field goal to win the game, TCU could have won that game without a problem. You know what I mean? And so it was punch for punch with those two teams. Now, Colorado's got it's a cupcake this week, I feel like, against Nebraska. Not that they need to overlook them, but I think that it's doing whatever. But what I do like about Deion Sanders and what he's doing is that he is like the positive reinforcement. We ain't ever out of it. We ain't ever done. There can be no quits, in us. And as long as we are, all pulling in the same direction, that we can move mountains. And I think that gets lost. When you finally he's able to get guys on the same page and pulling in the same direction very quickly.
Guys, there's a little.
I think every coach sends, some do it better than others, but every coach is positive reinforcement for their players. I mean, I don't think Deion invented that. Where I think Deion has done what other coaches haven't done, as I said, and I know that Nick Saban hasn't done this, and I know maybe a couple others haven't. He's embraced the NIL. He's going to go get his player. He's going to bring them in. And that's the biggest difference I see this between Deion and the other coaches, guys. The other NFL coaches prepare. They reinforce with their stuff. Deion doesn't have players, third stringers sitting on the bench that were promised to start at a school. He's taking those players that were promised to start at a school and bringing them in. And I think this is where Deion is better than the other coaches right now.
Speaking of coaches, there's a little sidebar to today's game with Colorado, Nebraska that no one's talking about. Matt Rule is back in college. He left college, Baylor to coach the Carolina Panthers. He signed a 7-year deal. The Giants actually were hoping he'd be their coach at one point, but he went to Carolina instead. It didn't work out. They didn't win there. The owner was impatient. And now he's back in college. And he lost his first game. He's 0-1. So you're talking about Deion Sanders going against not only an established college coach, but a former NFL coach who coached the Panthers, who just went back to college this year. So you're kind of, Matt Rule, to his way of thinking, he wants to beat Deion Sanders. He doesn't want to lose to a comparative novice coach in his mind, even though Deion did coach at Jackson State. That's not a major program. So there's a lot riding on it, I think, for Matt Rule in today's game. He doesn't want to be embarrassed, go to 0-2, against Deion Sanders.
What do you two think? Do you two think that Deion beats Rule today?
I kind of feel there's a certain Tim Tebow-ish to Deion Sanders for right now. He's going to go on a kind of roll that's going to keep the football world captivated the way Tebow did. Eventually, things catch up to you, and you're only as good as your talent allows you to go eventually. But I think they'll find a way to keep it going and keep it interesting. I don't think when all is said and done, Colorado just ends the year with 2-3 wins, and I don't think it was an aberration them beating TCU. I think it had to do with Deion Sanders taking them to another level, maybe not a playoff level, but a much higher level where they can, at least hold their own with the big programs.
So if you haven't heard, folks, it ends today. So you got to get your picks in by the end of today. We're not taking any picks tomorrow. I don't have time, but pick all 15 NFL winners and get a free Mac. Me and Jack are wearing a Mac and Jack shirt and coffee mug. Just hit that email at the bottom there, macmanperry121062@yahoo.com, and get your free shirt and mug. And Pags, you can't play. It's only for the listeners out there.
Pags isn't getting off 15 winners. It doesn't matter.
Neither is anybody else. Neither is anybody else.
Let me tell you, Pags, what Mac reminds me of. When I was a boy, there used to be a thing in the Rockaway Boardwalk called a nickel pitch. If you could pitch a nickel in these little circles, you win a prize. Right in the middle, you win a television set. Now, the circle was so small, you could draw a nickel around it. That was the size of it, drawing around a nickel. I couldn't believe it. A guy throws the perfect nickel. It was like hitting the lottery. He gets it in perfect. And the guy on the bullhorn says, is it a new UHF, VHF portable television set? Is it? And then he says no, and he shoves the nickel away. And the guy who flipped the nickel was going berserk. But the guy actually hit the lotto and he got the nickel in there. But in this day and age, you don't have a cell phone. You can't take the picture. You have no recordings. You could get away with anything. And they never gave the guy the TV set, meaning it was completely rigged. The worker had orders, I'm sure. Don't give the TV set away no matter what.
So Jack, with one of his great old stories that he tells every now and then, it can be done, folks. Don't listen to them.
But Pags' point is well taken. They're not going to get off 15. That's why you're not giving the shirt out, Mac. You're keeping that shirt.
It doesn't cost anything to enter. So it's not like
well,
one of these
15. 15.
See, I didn't even get my shirt yet. I didn't get my shirt yet, as you guys are wearing yours, and I am wearing.
I don't.
I paid for mine, Pags.
All right, you text me the size. Bags, text me the size after.
You know what Max likes,
Jack,
Max.
Jack, let me finish the sentence. Bags, after you text the show, text after the show and your size, and we'll send you one. No problem.
Pags, Mac is like the owner of the Oakland A's and Moneyball who made the players put in $1 in the machine if they wanted soda.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's get to the next topic, guys. Shohei Ohtani. Injury. Might have to have an operation. And I've said this before. That's why there is no pitchers and hit in baseball. Not like the NL where they took a walk. I'm talking about actually went out there and hit home runs. This is why they're not in baseball anymore, because you get injured and then you can't do either. That's why the Yankees did what they did with Babe Ruth. They said, nah, you're not going to do both. We may spot start you now and then as a pitcher, and Babe Ruth could have gone in as a pitcher or as a hitter, but the Yankees, of course, picked him to be a hitter and play right field. I think right field. I think it was for the most part. But anyway, does this injury, Jack and Pags, does this cause teams to shy away from signing him? Is he stuck with the Angels again? What do you think, Jack?
Well, I don't know whether he's gone back to the Angels, but I hate to say it. Yeah, I think it is going to have a couple of teams who are very interested, maybe shy away from him. Keep in mind, not that many teams would be able to afford him. Okay, but they'll be bidding on him. There'll be 6 to 8 teams. The amount of money that he might have to be paid, they have marketing people. I would put my marketing people in charge and say, how much revenue does this guy mean to me? Can I still afford to pay him the big money and not worry about coming out on the losing end of it? But with that said, yeah, it has an effect. He's still going to be the highest paid player in Major League history, but how much higher? Before, it was thought $50 million a year might not be enough, that he's going to have to get maybe close to 600 million for 10 years, maybe 11 years, over 600 million. Now that the numbers went down, yeah, he's still going to be the highest paid player in Major League history. He's still going to pitch, but some teams are going to be more hesitant to go all in on him at the type of money they'd have to pay.
Pags, what do you think? You think that he's going to draw the biggest contract in the history of baseball?
No, not anymore. I think that injury cost him like $150 million. It's like that's going to be the most expensive, UCL, and it's a second one. So that really forces you to think about whether he's going to be able to pitch again with any type of longevity. Now, if it were me and it was my team, I would consider using him as a closer. The problem is that you can't get him out to the bullpen while he's going to be up to bat. So that's part of the hard part about this, that them switching to the DH across the board removes that possibility of you being able to be a relief pitcher, because you have to be in the dugout to be able to bat rather than being out in the bullpen warming up. So I think that he is going to be in a much more manageable situation for contract for a lot of teams. I think the injury brought a lot of teams back into the mix. And it's not guaranteed he's going to stay with the Angels now, because ultimately it's whoever's going to pay him the most for this year coming up, where he's not going to play at all, that's going to dictate how he gets paid for, who he gets paid by.
I think there's more of a likelihood he would stay with the Angels now if the price is going down a little, if no one's going to offer him a crazy contract. Keep in mind, it takes only one team who decides we're still paying him the same amount, just one team, and he might go there. But I think the Angels gave up so much to try to keep him happy to stay in the divisional race that they're all in on Ohtani for the rest of his career. You make a good point, Pax, that I was thinking. You could use him as a closer, but what about this? If Ohtani's willing to play first base, he's a great athlete. You're keeping your arm loose between innings, throwing the ball back and forth. So you are somewhat loose if he's going to not just sit in the dugout, is a position player throwing the ball. And then he can come into the game for, the three batters, even go back in the field or something afterwards if you don't want to use him as a closer, want to use him as middle relief
See,
now and then.
now the reason why he's not able to do that in terms of playing first base is because of the new rule they made with position players. So that, it's funny how that rule would come into play here, that you can't use a position player unless you are down or up by 9 runs. And it's got to be in the 8th or 9th inning. So that actually becomes that rule actually becomes into play for him specific. So then he would not be able to do that.
That's
And
right. Yeah, you have a good point. Great point. But that rule wasn't made for Otani's situation because he would only come
but
in
now,
with the
but now
game on
it
the
doesn't matter
line.
that it was made for Otani or not.
Yeah,
It's
there
now in
has to
play.
be. But there should be a new rule coming in. If a guy has a history of being a legitimate pitcher and he's playing a position, they should be allowed to utilize him however they want as a pitcher. That's a
Do you
great
think
point.
the
Maybe
other owners?
Ohtani
Do you think the
rule.
other owners would agree to that? Because really, only one owner
I was
in
just going to say.
baseball
I was
is
just
Wow.
going
going
to
to say
agree to
that.
that.
There's only
You
one
mentioned a
player.
great point, Pax. Great point, but it would be so unfair to any team that says Otani because there's a legitimate pitcher, and to have that same rule as a normal position player for him, that would be an injustice.
It might.
And the other question becomes is a DH considered a position? And that's, because ultimately that comes into play as well. Like, how do is if the DH is considered a position and he was to come in that regards, like as a closer, this is not, obviously he's not a starting pitcher anymore. Is that rule valid? So that's two things that would have to come into play specifically for Otani if that was the way that anybody was going to go.
Well,
Mm.
let's throw one more thing in there. I mean, Otani, I would imagine, wants to play for a championship team. I mean, the Angels definitely aren't going to be a championship team next year. Do you think that Otani takes a cut in pay to go play for a championship team?
Well, I think he's taking a cut in pay anyways because of the injury.
But even more so, Pags, does that make the price even, maybe he takes even lower? Does he want to go play for the Dodgers? Does he want to go play for the Giants? Does he want to go play, for the Houston Astros, for example? Would he take a deeper pay cut to do that?
I don't know about the Houston Astros, but if there was going to be a type of hometown discount that I think he would take, I think he would go to Seattle, and only because of Ichiro. I mean, I think that would be the common thread. And again, I'm not his manager, so I'm not going to be the one that says, "Hey, if we're going to take a pay cut, we'll go to Seattle." But they actually have a pretty good team. They are priming themselves to possibly make a run for a World Series in the next couple of years, and that would be a good spot for him to go, because there's already a large Asian contingent as part of that. And isn't Ichiro still part of that franchise?
I'm not.
Oh,
That
he's
I'm
not
not sure.
visible, but I'll say this. The Angels have treated Otani like royalty. They've been so good to him, so nurturing to him his whole time there. So he might have this certain fondness towards them where he really doesn't want to go anywhere at all. We don't know what he's thinking. Also, it's different from when he signed with the Angels. He's been around all these ballparks, all these cities. He didn't want to come to the Yankees. For all you know, he likes New York. I mean, people have their quirks. Look at Aaron Rodgers. He played for small town Green Bay, but he loves the Manhattan. He loves the whole thing now. With Otani, you never know. And then there's Steve Cohen. Maybe Steve Cohen is still willing to spend the big money and is going to
I,
throw filthy money
Jack,
Otani.
Jack, he's gonna.
Not with the new baseball president of baseball operations. He
And
ain't.
not only that, yeah, that's true. And not only that, he's going to stay out. He's already said he's going to stay out in the West Coast. That he's already said. He said that a few times. He said he didn't want to play in New York. So anyway,
Because he did get a big ovation in Philadelphia. They were chanting for him to come
sure,
to Philadelphia too.
sure,
So I
sure.
mean I think he'll
Well,
entertain a little bit, but he
what's
wants to stay on the
better for
West
the
Coast because that's where think about it. On the West Coast, the time difference in Japan is only like 7 hours.
And they can, yeah, and exactly. That's exactly right. And that's what I think. That's why he's going
I
to
think
stay.
about Seattle too. I get that sneaking feeling, yeah, that's the most likely place. Certainly if he's, yeah, that would be the front runner to me, even though we think the Dodgers, maybe the Giants.
Yeah, he's going to stay. He's going to stay on the West Coast. There's
I
no
think
doubt about it.
Angels 1, Seattle 2. That would be on my radar right now where he'd stay. Because I think Artie Moreno is going to pay him the Angel loan of the money he desires. And then it's a question whether he just wants to leave.
So, guys,
I don't want to cut you off real quick. What do you guys think about there being a Champions League of baseball after the World Series? Teams like that, like the top 2 teams from each league, and when I mean Major League Baseball, Japanese League, the Korean League, and I want to say the Dominican League or something like that.
Yeah,
Getting together to have a tournament. I
No
like that
interest.
idea.
I think you're wrong, Jack. There would be interest in other countries, maybe not the
Other
United States.
countries. No.
Yeah, but I've always been an advocate of a real World Series. I've always been an advocate.
Mac. By
So-
the time the World Series rolls around, unless your team is in it, you're out of gas. You're too tired of baseball, the long stretch of the regular season, the playoffs. When the
I
Phillies
think
played
the
the
other
Astros,
countries. I'm
that
talking
was
about
really
world. I'm not
impressive.
talking
We
about.
weren't
Listen,
as
I'm not
interested
talking
anymore.
about the New York Yankees. I'm talking to fans. I'm talking about the world. The thing that would light up the world playing a real World Series.
No,
with
you
the
know what's
best
better than
team
that?
and
One
equally.
team goes on tour. Maybe I can understand.
No, I
One
want
team in
a World
advance
Series.
knows when their season ends, they're going on tour.
I
They're
want a
ready,
World
they're
Series.
cool, and
No.
they're
I'm not talking about.
compensated
I'm not
accordingly.
talking about Babe Ruth in the Negro Leagues, Jack, or going around the world. I'm talking an actual World Series. I think it would be great for the world of baseball, and I think there would be interest in the United States like there is in a World Cup. I really think so, Pat.
Yeah, like the World Baseball Classic had
Great.
interest this year.
I think it would be
I
great.
think, and that's probably when you'd have to do it. You'd have to do it as a preseason, tournament rather than the end of season tournament. You
Like
couldn't
the
do it
World
in
Series
November.
winner. I agree. Like the World Series
Right,
winner comes,
okay,
and they play
okay.
against the championship teams of around the world. I think that'd be great.
But
Let's
that's
get
the
to the
World
last.
Baseball Classic. But that just have the World Baseball Classic every year and make the major league teams have to send their players to play.
No. I want the Japanese championship team against the Mexican championship team. And
Okay,
play
but do
to
that. Okay, fine, but do that in February. Okay, before as a lead into the regular season. You're right, but not after the World Series, before the regular season. Then I would find it interesting. Yeah.
Let's get probably the last question today. If you're the GM for the 76ers or the Milwaukee Bucks guys, and you trade Embiid or Giannis, how much jeopardy is your job going to be in? What do you think, Pag? Since we're talking Embiid and we're talking the 76ers, how much jeopardy would your GM or the GM of the Bucks be in?
Well, you're talking trading them or just losing them.
Yeah.
So it's like if
Trade
you're
them for
trading
something.
them away, you better get a tremendous haul. I mean, you think about what was it? Was it Porzingis that got like
No,
you know,
Rudy Gobert.
Gobert that got like ridiculous
like 9
picks?
players back, like 5
Yeah, I
number
mean,
ones.
like you'd have to have like you better get a whole basketball team. Like you better get like I want your picks for like the next 7 years, And I mean, and I didn't the NBA cap that now. Like you can only do 5 picks. Like only 5 picks can be given away in a trade or something like that. I mean, there's some weird rules now because of that. Or you can only maybe go 7 years into the future with picks. But you better get like every first round pick plus a couple of really good players because the market has already been set by Gobert. You know what I mean? And we're not even talking about Giannis or Embiid.
Jack, what do you think? Do you think, I mean, these are your two stars. Of course, Giannis went to a championship already. 76ers have been in the mix close a couple times. I mean, what do you think? I mean, if you fail, I mean, you're not going to win right away. Are the fans going to be patient?
Well, let me tell you this. When you talk about a Joel Embiid or Giannis, a GM never trades away a player that caliber without clearing it with the owner. The owner doesn't hear about it. Oh, by the way, the GM says, I traded so-and-so. You better believe Daryl Morey, for example, he's not trading Joel Embiid without going to the Sixer ownership and discussing it. They're going to have to sign off on the GM making a deal. And then it's the GM's responsibility to make the best possible deal. And he's the one negotiating the deal. But you first got to get clearance on that. And I mean, fans are smart when it comes to something like a Joel Embiid. Right now, Joel Embiid hasn't asked for a trade. So the Sixers aren't going to trade him because there would be an uproar if they traded Joel Embiid right now, unless they got an incredible haul back. But if Joel Embiid started demanding a trade and everyone knew he wanted out and they knew it was a matter of time, eventually, you resign yourself to we have to trade the guy because the relationship can't get repaired. It's not that way with Joel Embiid. It's not that way with Giannis. But if Giannis is going to become an unrestricted free agent in 1 year and Milwaukee gets the feeling that they won't be able to re-sign him, yeah, they make the best possible deal. As I recall, the Bucks traded away a greater player than Giannis once in their history, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And they got, they got a nice return, but not something that fitted up to Jabbar's caliber. The Sixers traded Wilt Chamberlain away. I mean,
hold on, the Milwaukee Bucks traded away. The Milwaukee Bucks traded
Lou
Kareem
Alcindor.
Abdul-Jabbar. Yeah, I thought. Oh, no. I thought Milwaukee. It was the Milwaukee Lakers, and they moved to LA.
Bucks. Milwaukee Bucks, who had won an NBA championship with Lou Alcindor, and Oscar Robertson was in the backside of his career. They eventually traded him away because Kareem wanted out of Milwaukee. So they made the best possible deal that they could make. I mean, people think of Kareem as being a lifetime Laker. They forget about his legacy being a champion with the Milwaukee Bucks 1 year. That was his first of his 6 championships. And so that ownership has to sign off on it. I don't think the GM is in trouble.
The one that's going to get fired ain't the owner. It would be the GM, Jack. So I mean, that's
the owner would have to fire the GM. If the owner
I understand that,
the
but the GM's responsible for that trade or whatever comes back of the trade. So, Pags, would the 76ers be patient enough if, say, they did get rid of Embiid? You get some players, you get some draft picks. Are the Philadelphia 76er fans willing to wait a few years to become good again, or to become an NBA championship contender? I didn't think
no. I think that you're going to see a lot of disgruntled fans. I mean, we are still trusting this process right now. You know what I mean? And that's I think that once you trade Embiid, there's no more trust in the process. You don't trust what this team is doing anymore.
Okay. All right. So, folks, we're coming to the end of the show. Thanks for joining us here on the Mac and Jack Sports Debate Show. Thanks to Paz coming in. Jack and me and Jim Jeffcoat will be hosting the Sunday Big Football Show. It's going to be crazy. We'll have Pags in live. We're going to have the Commander of Washington, one of the super fans for Washington, the Jet Man. We'll have Stan's Man from the Giants there, and plus Keith Angle, Robert Butler. We're going to be doing our top 3 picks, our underdog pick, the favorite picks on the top 3, underdog underneath. And so it should be a lot of fun. It should be crazy. And I hope everyone that is watching this now and later will join us there. Rick says, see you tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow, Rick. Have a great day. Have a great Saturday night. Let's do